Okay, hi, welcome to CIS 1 or CIS 222, 222. And what we're going to cover is we're going to cover the second half of the book, probably the last 2/3. We're going to start with Chapter 7. Now, Chapter 7 should be a little bit of review for us since we wrapped up CIS 120. A lot of what we are going to cover in Chapter 7 was covered in CIS 120. So again, this is more or less kind of a review chapter. So basically, this is the website we are going to end up with when we get done with it. So what we are going to start with is this. So this is the website that we are basically starting with, and as you can see, it's just a plain, simple, run-of-the-mill website. I'm using Notepad++. Make sure you use that when you open these up. It'll automatically put things in the right order, and it actually colorizes them. So again, this is the finished version of the CSS, and this is the finished version of the HTML. So what we're going to do is we are going to open up our starting CSS, and this is basically what it looks like. Now if we look, we'll notice that we've got this first section has got all of the different tags that we have available to us, and what it has in the comments, it says reset the browser styles, and in there it basically has, HTML body, divs, spans, H3, H1s. It's got all the different tags, and then it basically just has margin 0, padding 0, border 0, font 100%, and then it says vertical alignment as the baseline. The baseline is going to be whatever that font we're currently using. It's going to take the default line spacing, or I should say vertical alignment line spacing for that particular font. This is kind of a nice thing to add to every one of your CSSs, so that we basically are starting at ground zero, basically. So we're starting here and then working up. So that's really all that does. And I think we're going to see that throughout the entire book, where they always start with that type of CSS to kind of get us started at ground zero so we can work way up. Okay, so it looks like we've got some different classes or different sections. I'm sorry, these are actually tags that we have available to us. These are CSS3 HTML5 tags: article, aside, details, fig caption, figure, footer, header, H group, menu, nav, and section. So these are actually brand new tags available in HTML5. We go ahead and display them as a block. Okay, so we'll get a little bit into that. I think we already covered that. Okay, so and then we just set up our body. We're going to have a line height of 1.2. We're going to have an ordered list. It's going to have a padding left of 1.4 ems. It's going to have a list style of decimal. It's going to have an unordered list of padding of 1.4 and a list style of square. And then we've got our table, we've got our border collapse, and our border spacing is 0. So we just kind of got our basic starting item. So if we were to look at I think we already did that, so this is basically what we're starting with, so that's really all it is. And if we look at that code, this is basically all that it is. Got our HTML, there's our head, we got our meta tags, we've got our title, we've got our link to the style sheet, and then we've got our body. It's basically pointing to the ID article. So do we have an article in there? I don't think we did. No, we did not. Well, here's our article right there. So it defaults to the display block. Okay, so we've got our div ID banner, and we've got this is our graphic that we are displaying up here. That is sitting in an image folder in the same exact place as our index.html. We've got some H1s, we've got a paragraph, we've got an H2, another H2, another paragraph, another H2, another H2, and then we got our ending body in HTML. So it's pretty basic. So again, if we look at it, we can see that here's our H1 and here's a bunch of H2s in there that we are basically utilizing. So if we're going to go, I'm going to actually go through the tutorial at the end of the chapter. We're going to go there basically one section at a time. And the very first thing it does is it talks about the reset styles. But the first thing it does is it's got the so I come over here, I'm just going to put it right below the body. I paste it in, and it basically says HTML, and it's got background color, and it's using the RGBs. And again, that's red, green, blue. So it's pretty bright red, kind of a bright green, and kind of a mid blue. So it's going to give us some color scheme that is going to set the background of our entire HTML. So if I save it, and I go back to that page and I do a refresh, we can see that now our background is kind of that yellowish color. So we basically set the background of our entire HTML with that RGB color. Okay, so nothing too bad there. So now we're going to add another style. So I come over here and I want to grab my body. I'm just going to grab these first two. And just put it right down below that guy and then put my ending tag there. Save it. So we've got a background color and a border of our body. Now the HTML is the entire thing. Our body now is basically what is kind of like the part we're dealing with just inside the HTML. So I come over here and I do a refresh, and there I've now set it to a white, and there is my border. Okay, so not too bad. So it then basically says we want to edit the body style and add 5 new properties, which are basically, so we're going to talk about the max width. The max width property constrains the body so that it never gets wider than that. And then we have our margin top, which is going to set to 20 pixels. Okay, so let's just go ahead and grab those real quick. So I grab these, max width, margin top, left, right, and padding. So I grab that guy. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that right inside of the body. So we've got our max width, 760 pixels. That means it will never, so no matter what, no matter how big our screen gets, so if we go to a super duper high resolution screen, this body is never going to get bigger than 760 pixels. Our margin top, we're going to automatically put 20 pixels. Margin left is auto, margin right is auto. If you remember what those do, it automatically centers that property, in this case the property, in the center of the screen. It doesn't matter how wide the screen is, it's going to put it right smack dab in the middle. And we've got a padding of 15. Now this is a shortcut, which means the padding, I should say shortcut, we'll talk about shortcuts later on, but what this says is padding inside. So think of padding as the margin inside of something. The margin itself is the big object that's on the outside. Padding is on the inside. So on the inside of the body, we're going to have 15 pixels, and that's top, right, bottom, left. That's all 4 sides. Okay, so I go ahead and save this. I come back over here, and now I'm going to do a refresh. And now we can see there is our max width. We've set our padding. We've also set our margin. Notice our margin top, left, and our auto left and right. That centers it in the screen. And basically we've got our padding. Again, that's on the inside of that property. And so it's 15 pixels here, 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 and here. So all four sides have a padding on the inside of 15. Okay, so it says, now there's a note in here, it says we could have also used the margin shorthand property and basically did this, okay? Since I'm doing top and left and right, I could have just done margin 20 pixels, space, no comma, auto, space, 0. I always like to put pixels on there so everybody knows what they are, and auto. Now if you remember correctly, now this is true shorthand. What that means is, if we got 4 in there, it's top, let me go for you, top, right, bottom, left. Okay, so there's top, 20 pixels, left, I should say right, so top, right, bottom, left. So top is 20 pixels, right is auto, bottom is 0 pixels. That means everything's going to be butted right up to it. And then auto, again, since they're both auto, it's going to automatically center that. So if I delete those and do a refresh or save and a refresh, we'll basically see no difference in that screen. Okay. What's nice about that is it puts it on one line, and it's basically all we're trying to do is save a little space. Okay. So next thing we want to do is we want to edit the body style that we just created, and we want to add a property that will go ahead and add a box shadow to that body text. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to go ahead and grab this box shadow. And I'm going to go ahead and throw it right here. So here we've got our box shadow 0015, 5 pixels RGB. So basically we got a color. And remember, we're using the RGBA. When we add the A, we can actually make that, we've got one more property at the end, which is our transparency. We're going to make it 75% and 25% transparent. Okay, if it's 100%, that means it's not transparent. 0 means it's totally transparent. So the lower the number, the more transparent it gets. We basically have our top, right, bottom, left. Okay, so top and right are going to be 0, and then bottom and left, bottom's going to be 15 pixels and 5, and that basically tells how does this shadow basically, so we're going to have no shadow on two sides and then 2 shadows on the other side. So now when I save it, and I go back over here and do a refresh, there we can kind of, well, let's see that. That's right, this is the box shadow. So what it's doing is we told it that we don't want, there's 4 properties. One is how wide it is, how far away it is, and then basically on the inside, do we want anything on the inside as well? So that's basically what we just did there. Okay, so we want 00 means nothing on the inside, and then the 5 and the 15 mean how wide do we want it, and then how solid do we want it. So the 15 is telling it, hey, let's make it look kind of fuzzy. So that's why it's real fuzzy. The lower that number, the more solid it gets. If it's a 0, it's going to, or 1, it's going to be totally a solid shadow. Okay, so pretty good. Again, a little bit of review. So if we continue on, now we're going to just use spacing around our tags. So again, we've got this is an H1 tag, this is an H2, 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 and then we just didn't have normal text. So it says we want to go, and we're going to click on the, we're going to basically change our H1 tag. So we want to add some stuff to this H1 tag. We actually want it to be centered across the screen. We want to change the font color, and then we want to change the background color. So to do that, we are going to grab our H1 tag here, and we are going to just grab this guy. We'll get to the rest here in a little bit. Okay, so if we look, we change the font size to 2.75 M's. That's a pretty good size. Our font family is a Times New Roman, Georgia, meaning that's kind of the default. If Times New Roman is available, we're going to default to the Georgia, and then it's Times and Serif, meaning it's going to have the little tags. Font weight is normal. It's not font weight bold, it's just normal. Our text alignment is center. Our letter spacing is 1 pixel. So we want a little, I think we want a little tighter there. We want our letter spacing is 1 pixel. We already talked about that. Our color is going to be RGB. That's not a whole big lot of red there. That's not a lot of green, and that's very little blue. And then we're going to do a text transform. We're going to convert everything to uppercase. Again, this is all review. We've already covered all this. So when I save it and I go back over here, we can see that we now have our font is big. It's converted to uppercase. It's centered. We've got some spacing going on there. So now we've got a nice title. So let's change it up a little bit more, and here we want to go ahead and change our background color. So let's go ahead and change our background color. So if we look, our background color is going to just be RGB 226. 235, 180. So again, that's kind of a bright red, kind of a bright green, and about half a blue. So we save that, and we look at it, and it's a lighter green. So we've got a dark green and a light green. That looks good. But what I'd really like it to see is I'd like to see this background color be brought all the way to the edge. But if you notice, remember, we have our margins set at 20. So, I'm sorry to say our padding. Is padding set at 20 or 15? Anyways, we have padding going on there, so we may need to work against that. So we have to work against our padding a little bit. So to do that, we're going to have our own padding just for this text. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the padding. Again, remember, top right, bottom left. I come down, I do so my padding is 5, 15, 2, and 15. So top is 5, right is 15, bottom is 2, and the left is 15. So I save it, I refresh, and really all that it did is it gave us a little more spacing at the top and the bottom. It really didn't do anything to the sides. And the reason for that is now we're dealing with the padding that's inside of here. If you remember from 120 is when if I have one object, if I have one element here and I've got another element here, and let's say this element has a bottom margin of 10, and this one down below has a margin of 5, a top margin of 5, what does that mean? Does that mean it's going to be 15? No, that means it's always going to take the greater of the two, and it's going to ignore the other one. So it would only basically be a 10 margin. So I come back to here, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the actual margin of this property, not just the padding, but the margin. So the padding we just changed really only dealt with the top and the bottom. What we want to do is deal with the margin around the whole thing. So to do that, I'm going to copy. I'm going to come over here and do a paste. So I'm saying I want the margin, the top to be 0. So it means butt it up against whatever's there. Make the right -15. That means go past, because remember, our padding is 15. So I want to go past the padding to the edge. So that's what that's going to do. So this really kind of nullifies the padding that's already existing. Our bottom is going to be 20 pixels, and then our left is going to be a -15 as well. Again, get past that. So now when I save this, and I do a refresh, sure enough, now we're bypassing the padding because we told the margin, say -15, go past the padding that's already there and go to the edge of this body border. Okay, so far so good. We've got a nice looking website, we've got a nice box, we've got a nice border, we've got some shadowing, we've got a nice title going across the screen. Now the sad thing is this H1 tag, if I were to add another H1 tag somewhere in here, so let's say for example, I were to go into here and change this to an H1 tag, and then save it. If I come back out here and do a refresh, look what it did. All H1 tags are going to have that property. So you have to be careful with that. But we're going to deprecate here. I can't ever pronounce it. We're going to basically show how we can get around that when we need to. So, okay. So to continue on, we're going to change our H2 tags now. So we come over here and I want to grab the H2 tag property. And I'm going to grab this first part here. And I'm going to throw it down here below the H1 tag. And let's take a look at it. So I got a font size of 1.5. Up here at H1 I have a 2.75. I've got a font family. Now we're going to use Arial, sans serif. That means get rid of the little tags. The color is going to be RGB 249, 107, and 24. So that's really bright red, not about halfway green, and a very low blue. We've got a border top of 2 pixels. It's going to be dotted, so it's a dotted line. It's only on the top. And the RGB color, so we got a color for that dotted line. We've got a border bottom, 2 pixels dotted and the same exact color. So we're going to have 2 dotted lines over the top of our H2 tags. We've got our padding top, which makes sure that inside that border, this is going to be how far it is, how far our text is away from the border itself. Our padding bottom, same thing, 5 pixels. How far away from the border do we want to be? So then our margin is, again, top right, bottom left. So the top is 15 pixels, right 0, bottom is 5, and left is 0. So let me save this. Let me come out here and refresh. And look at that. So there's our dotted lines that go all the way across. And there is our the color, our font color. It's Arial. Looks pretty good. So now we've kind of separated out our sections. Now we can really make some distinct sections on our website. Okay, so continuing on. So the thing we want to do now is we want to build what is called a sidebar. If you remember over here, this guy right here is called a sidebar. So I now want to take this note box, I want to take this and make its own little section off to the side. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to need to do first is we need to add some text. We need to change the HTML so that we now have a class, a div. We're going to use div tags to use a class around that note section. So to do that, I'm going to come over here to this index, and this is, so I want this div tag to this ending div tag, which is called sidebar. So I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to come over here, and here is my note tag, and all the way down to my P tag. Okay, so I'm going to highlight these two guys, and I'm going to do a paste, which now has the div class sidebar. And there's my note, and there's my class note. There's a note class in there, and there's our ending div tag. So if I save this and basically do a refresh, nothing. And the reason being is we do not have a sidebar yet. So again, if we look at this guy, I do not have any kind of a sidebar going on here. So what I need to do is, now if we look at that code, it says div class equals sidebar. Now if you remember, a class can be used on multiple items, and the other one, just lost what it was. Anyways, the other one, which is the pound signs, those only are to specific tags, specific properties. Okay, so so I come up here, and we are going, I'm going to go to this guy, and I'm going to grab this sidebar, and I'm going to grab all the way up to the margin. So copy, and I'm going to paste it in down here, put my ending brace. So we've got a width of 30%. I only want it 30%. So however wide that body property is, we're going to take 30% of it, and we're going to basically make this no wider than that. We're going to make it float to the right. We know what that does. I make sure it floats all the way to the right. It's up against that side, and the margin is 10 pixels. It's going to stay away from all the margins. It's going to have everything around, not on the inside. Remember, padding is the inside. Margins on the outside of that sidebar is going to be 10 pixels. So I save it. I refresh, and look at that. Now, how does that look? It looks kind of bad, because since it's a float, it's just going to float on the top of anything that's in its way, especially borders. Text is going to push text out of the way, but the borders no. So if you notice, we've got some borders going through for this top H2 tag and this middle H2 tag. Need to get rid of those. So let's kind of look, and so what we're going to do is we are going to add a background color and some padding. Okay. So now I've got a background color, again, RGB 250, 235, 199. That's almost black. Okay. So that's almost all the way red, pretty high green, and pretty high blue as well. Got a padding of 10 pixels. Now, since we only have two properties, that means the 10 is the top and the bottom, and the 20 is the left and the right. And so, so it's going to have padding on the inside of our sidebar is going to be top and bottom 10, left and right 20. And it's going to have a background color. That should get rid of the other dotted lines kind of bleeding through. So I save it. I come over here and I do a refresh, and sure enough, there is my background color. Notice my padding going on there. So I've got some padding on the inside. Notice my border doesn't go all the way to the edges because of the padding. So now that looks a lot better than it did. Okay, nice little box inside of there to say, hey, this guy, I want it basically have its own distinct display on the screen. Okay. So now what we want to do is we are going to come over here and we're going to grab these borders, a border, and so copy, and then we are going to do a paste. So we got a border, 1 pixel, dotted, RGB. Now since that's a border, that's all 4 sides. So it's going to be a dotted, it's only going to be a 1 pixel wide, it's going to be dotted, it's going to have that color. Then I got border top of 20 pixels, it's solid. Now, solid 20 pixels, that's a pretty wide border. That's a really wide border, and it's going to have a completely, well, it's got the same exact color as the other borders. They're going to be the same color. So when I save it, and I go out here and refresh. There it is. Very wide border on the top, and notice I got dotted on the other three sides. There's actually a dotted top border, but since I went ahead and added a top border, it basically overlays on top of it, and we can't see the dotted line, but it's there. We just can't see it because we've got a border basically sitting on top of it with same color but very wide, and it's solid. Okay, so we've taken that guy away. Now, since we've got a margin on the outside, notice we can still see the borders from the other two H2 tags. So those are there, which is okay. That's fine. So now let's do this. We're going to grab this border radius and this box shadow. I'm going to do a copy. And I'm going to do a paste. So a border radius, now what that says is I want rounded corners. The bigger the number, the more rounded it is. And the border shadow, again, we've kind of talked about that. Basically, where do we want the shadows to appear? How wide? How thick? How how far away? And then basically we have a color of, wow, is that black? I think that's all black, and then a transparency of 0.5. That's going to be very, very transparent. So save it, refresh, and there it is. So there's our shadow. It's only on the bottom and the right. And look at the rounded corners. Now, that is a nice little box to stand out against the rest of the page. We really, really, really brought that out. Okay. Continue on number 8, we are going to then add the sidebar. Well, this is where we're going to do what is called decadent, okay, or descendant. D-E-S-C-E-N-D-A-N-T. Descendant. Anyways, so what that allows us to do is, this is where I want to be able to change the property of an H1 tag, but only inside of another class. Okay, so I want to change all of the H2 tags that are inside of this class, but it won't affect any other ones outside of that class. So the way I do that is I have this. Let me just copy and paste it, and then we'll talk about it. So here I've got dot sidebar, dot meaning class, H2. So it says any H2 tag inside of the sidebar class is going to have these properties. It's kind of a border none. The top margin on the top is going to be 0, and the padding is going to be 0. This is the H2 tag. So that means it's going to have no borders. Margin on top is going to be 0, which should push it all the way up to that. And our padding is going to be 0, which means on the inside there'll be no as well. So I think I kind of know what this is going to do. So let's take a look. I save it and I run it, and look at that. I took away the borders and I pushed that guy all the way up. Okay. Now notice that we've got some borders we've got some margins kind of going on there. Well, that's because these guys up here, we've got padding top and bottom. Those are always going to kick into place. Okay. So it's always going to take. So again, if I have a padding 1 and a padding 5, but again, it's always going to take the bigger of the two and forget the other one. So the padding up here for the H2 tag is going to come into play. So now, so it says because the sidebar, the style is more powerful. That is, it is greater specificity. specific. Yeah, I can't talk tonight. As described on page 102, then the basic H2 style. It erases the border from the original H2 tag style along with the top and bottom margin, the top margin and the bottom padding. However, since the style doesn't have a font size, color, or font family, those properties from the H2 style still apply, just like I talked about. So it's the cascade in action. So what we're saying is, like I said earlier, since these two H2, these borders and these margins are still in effect down here, how do we get past that? So the page is looking good, but the borders on the H2 tag still run up and behind the sidebar. That just doesn't look good, but you can still fix it easily. So again, I don't like these borders kind of showing up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this overflow hidden. So what we're telling it, when we have one property on top of the other and one overflows, in this case the borders go on behind it, I want to hide any overflows. So in the case this border is coming behind the other one, let's get rid of it. So okay. So our H2 tag has the borders. If they overflow on another property, another cascading style, let's go ahead and hide them. So I save it. I come over here. Again, watch these borders over here. I refresh. Boom, they go away. Notice that the borders now come right up to our sidebar and now stop, and this is where our margin comes into play. So the margin now tells the borders where to stop. It says, hey, don't overflow, stop right there, and you're done. Okay, so that is basically it. So we've now got this, if we looked at our previous version and now this version, really looks nice. So we've got our background color goes from edge to edge. We've got borders around all of our H2 tags, but we actually have the overflow, say hide the overflow. So in this case, when it comes up to another class, it stops and basically follows the margin. We've got a nice sidebar. We've got a real thick border at the top. We've got a dashed border around everything else. We got some nice shadowing going on. We've got shadowing going on our body tag. So really looks, a big huge change, a nice feature. This will probably look not too bad on a mobile device. We'll get into how to set things up for mobile devices later on, but again, this works. The previous way kind of sort of works with mobile devices, but this way here really kind of starts getting us into that mobile website design. Okay, chapter 7, review pretty much. A lot of stuff we should have already known. If you have any questions, again, make sure that you contact me and we will get those taken care of.